talk about this choice a little bit because the selection of this Russian dissident, some are saying, you know, it's a little bit of a thumb in the eye to President Trump. It shows how much Senator McCain was concerned about the activities of Vladimir Putin. And this individual, just to give everybody at home some of the background, he twice suffered organ failure from poisoning. They only knew each other, John McCain and this individual, for about 8 or 9 years. But he says that he got a personal message from Senator McCain, and he asking him if he would please be one of his pallbearers. And he responded saying, "I was speechless and heartbroken and close to tears at that moment. I said yes, of course, and that it would be the most heartbreaking honor that anyone could think of." And he also said that although he knew it was coming to an end, he knew that Senator McCain was busy sort of planning all of it. And he also said he didn't think that it was political. He thought really it was more of a message about the things that Senator McCain cared about. Interesting choice, to be sure.
Yeah, I doubt if it's political. Not that there hasn't been some political tint to the coverage. I mean, the lionization of John McCain. You know, the St. John McCain here, in the eyes of a lot of the mainstream media, he's a great man and a genuine hero. But, you know, you can detect in a lot of the national media, first of all, a little gigging of President Trump because of the exchanges those two guys had. By the way, I thought those exchanges, by and large, were pretty interesting and refreshing. A couple of them were not so helpful and not so positive. But, you know, rather than this usual Washington stuff, my friend, the senator from, right, you know, my good friend, Dick Durbin, you know, they went at it, and that's fine. That's the way men talk. But, no, look, I think a lot of the media is taking some pleasure in the fact that they can lionize John McCain. As they're doing it, they can get in a dig at Donald Trump.
It does make you wonder that some of these friendships that you see in these pallbearers, Warren Beatty is one of them, who thought at one point about running for office himself, and he and John McCain apparently had some chats about that. And at one point there was a suggestion that John McCain would be chosen as a vice presidential candidate when Joe Lieberman was running, you know, maybe to cross the lines, the political lines. But Warren Beatty spoke up and said, look, you know, there's no one has any doubt about John McCain's long-held and deeply held conservative beliefs, but he likes to be, you know, friends with a lot of different kinds of folks.
Well, he was certainly a Reagan conservative to begin with. I think later on, maybe not so much. I certainly had disagreements with him on McCain-Feingold and immigration and the thumbs down.
Russ Feingold's another pallbearer, by the way, as is Gary Hart. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. But that's, you know, that's John McCain. That's who he is. That's who you get. But notice when John McCain veered to the left, he was praised. When Joe Lieberman veered to the right, not so much.
Great point.
So, you know, that tells you something. But listen, I will remember him. I will remember him talking to my son, who was a junior in high school, who was considering going into the service, the Marine Corps, and John McCain spent an hour with him. And Joe went on to Princeton and became a Marine for 5 years after Princeton. Not many do after Princeton. But John McCain was not a small influence in that. And that love of country and that heroism, it seems to me, whatever our differences, you know, I was watching the people approaching the casket today and the flag. I think of what's said and what was said for some people in our family over the years. You know, a grateful nation thanks you for your service. And indeed it does. He gave his service, man, 5.5 years, and a lot of the rest of it too. Not all of it, you know, but a lot of the rest of it. Look, I just believe, and I don't mean to rain on the parade at all, but I believe a man who is big enough to be a hero for an age is big enough to have the truth told about him. And we can look and celebrate the life of John McCain in the totality of his actions and still say, you know, I liked what's his name, Angus King in Maine. Did you see what he said the other day? He said, when I worked at the Russell office building, which they're going to name the McCain building, he said, for short, we called it the Senate office building, the SOB for short. He said, we're finally getting the right guy to fit that SOB building.
So, my guess is Senator McCain would have a good laugh out of that one. He would absolutely had a great sense of humor. Good to see you tonight, Bill. Thank you so much. Always a pleasure.
Thanks, as always. Thank you, Martha.
An original Charlie's Angel, a fashion mogul, Jaclyn Smith has done it all. Her family, friendships, and her experiences in Hollywood.
Did you encounter men who crossed the line?
Yes.
Jaclyn Smith on the season finale of Objectified, Sunday on Fox News Channel.
So it was John Kerry, by the way, who wanted McCain to be the VP on his ticket. So that is our story for this Wednesday night. We'll be in D.C. tomorrow night. We look forward to seeing you there. Have a good night, everybody.
Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. We've been watching too much TV again and can't help but notice that it's a staple of every cable news show on television, pretty much. The battle for the soul of the Republican Party. The other channels are forever inviting on some discredited neocon moron or unemployed political hack to fret about how the GOP is in a state of existential crisis. The topic isn't entirely phony. Real rifts do exist, obviously, and we cover them. But basically, in its totality, this is propaganda because it intentionally obscures a much larger and far more interesting story. The Democratic Party is transforming before our eyes. The party of Tom Foley and Tip O'Neill and even Bill Clinton is long gone. Pretty soon, the party of Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer will be history, too. In its place is emerging something new, the party of Andrew Gillum. Gillum is the mayor of Tallahassee. As of last night, he's the Democratic nominee for governor of Florida. Here's some of what he believes.
We want to replace ICE with the Department of Justice, an entity that has not been tarnished in the same way as ICE has.
So again, he says you want to abolish ICE, you say you want to replace it. That's basically the same.
In the state of Florida, I also believe that health care ought to be treated like a right and not a privilege.
Do you think the president should be impeached?
I absolutely do. I think he's already incriminated himself by interfering with the Department of Justice, firing Jim Comey, of whom I'm no fan of, but basically obstructing justice.
The state of Florida has long been considered moderate politically. It's a vital swing state, obviously, during presidential elections. Many pundits last night and today, even Democrats, have been quick to dismiss Andrew Gillum's chances this fall. He's too far out, they're saying. He's too much of an outsider. That's absurd. They have no idea what they're talking about. They were embarrassingly wrong in the last election, and they have learned precisely nothing since. Amazingly, they're still in the predictions business when they should be selling aluminum siding or doing something useful. Ignore them. Of course Andrew Gillum could win. You ought to be taking his candidacy very seriously. Candidacies like his are erupting in a lot of places right now. The man almost certain to be governor of the biggest state in the country just announced that he plans to give free health care to foreign nationals here illegally. Watch.
I did universal health care when I was mayor, fully implemented, regardless of pre-existing condition, ability to pay, and regardless of your immigration status. San Francisco is the only universal health care plan for all undocumented residents in America. I'm very proud of that. And we proved it can be done without bankrupting the city. I'd like to see that we can extend that to the rest of the state.
So you sneak into a country, ignoring its laws, and you get free health care in return. What a country. In New York City, meanwhile, a city councilman named Jumaane Williams is within striking distance of becoming that state's next lieutenant governor. You might recognize his name. Williams is a pretty good guy, actually. He's a frequent guest on the show. He's the one who's always calling everyone a bigot, who wants to take your guns away and throw open the borders to the world. We're not exaggerating, by the way. Check YouTube if you don't believe it. That's him. Meanwhile, in the state of Arizona, the Democratic nominee for governor, David Garcia, says he would like to erase any barrier at all between the United States and Mexico.
I want to just take a second and imagine. Let's just imagine. Just imagine. No wall. No wall in southern Arizona.
Arizona was once one of the most conservative states politically in the country. Now it's a completely different place. He could win. If enough of these candidates do win, you won't have to imagine what a borderless America might look like. It'll be the reality and just the beginning of the new reality. Consider this, a proposal from Zephyr Teachout. She's a candidate for Attorney General in the state of New York.
And as Attorney General, I will continue to speak out against ICE. I will prosecute ICE for their criminal acts.
Putting law enforcement in prison for enforcing the laws that bipartisan majorities in Congress passed. So you don't need to be a Trump partisan or a conservative Republican or some kind of wacko right-winger to worry about all of this. Any normal American ought to be deeply concerned about what the Democratic Party is in the process of becoming. A lot of Democrats are very concerned about it, not that they talk about it on television. And concerned not because the ideas are bad or good for any one specific group, but because they're bad for America overall. Christopher Harris is the president of Unhyphenated America, and he joins us tonight. Mr. Harris, thank you very much for coming on. It seems worth talking about, to me, what the Democratic Party is becoming. I think a lot of Republicans are in complete denial about what could potentially happen in the fall and about what it means. And the press, I think, has been really unhelpful in just drawing out what these candidates are running on, what they say they believe.
Oh, it is. I wouldn't even say it's what they're becoming. I think it's what they are. I mean, at the end of the day, we have to address that this is not your father's Democratic Party. This is not the Democratic Party of John F. Kennedy. This is the party of Alexandra Ocasio. Or Ocasio-Cortez. I mean, this is the party of Bernie Sanders. This is who they are. But here's what they are. They're also desperate. And that's why they're using things like going after candidate DeSantis and trying to say that a phrase that he used that may have been inartful in his use, but when put in the proper context, it was not racist at all. And so what they're doing, and especially because his opponent is black, they're trying to basically have they're ringing the bell. Basically, it's a Pavlovian response that they're expecting from black people in general to say, oh, my God, this guy's a racist. We should try to get rid of him. But here's what's happening, Tucker. The economy is doing well. I mean, Florida has the second highest number of black-owned businesses. And there's about 251,000 black-owned businesses. And what happens is if you allow people like Mr. Gillum to get in office, here's what he wants to do. He wants to increase the corporate taxes on those black-owned businesses in general also by close to 50%. And so we need to address the things that are good for all of America.
Well, exactly. And that's kind of my frustration, is not that people disagree with me. I assume they do. But that we're having the wrong conversation. It's all a sideshow. It's all mindless.
Absolutely.
Okay, so-and-so said that. Okay, great. But here you have a candidate who's running on the idea that health care is a moral right. You have an obligation to pay for someone else's health care. Why aren't we debating that? Why aren't we fleshing out what that means? What are the implications of that? Is anybody even talking about that?
No, they're not. They've been conditioned to have a squirrel moment, you know. And I have to, it's all up, right? Squirrel, right? But, I mean, one of my favorite economists, Dr. Thomas Sowell, said he has three questions that pretty much invalidates everything the left says. You know, he always asks, at what cost, compared to what, and where's your hard data? So when people like Mr. Gillum says, oh, we need to have health care for all, and going back to the tax issue, one of the things he talked about in his campaign was saying, hey, you know what, our taxes will only be 1% lower than California. Well, California's a steaming pile of mess right now. I mean, it's falling apart. They had to hire people to come and clean up urine. And you had what? You had Gavin Newsom as the mayor, and he wants to be governor. Well, basically allowing someone like Mr. Gillum to be in charge of the entire state, the third largest state in the country with the fourth largest economy, a $967 billion economy. And they want to let someone like that run the state. It's going to hurt everybody. And that's one of those things that people need to be having this conversation.
It would be nice to have a conversation about economics once in a while and not just identity, because in the end, economics affects everybody.
It affects everybody.
Amen. Mr. Harris, thank you very much.
Thank you, Tucker.
CNN is continuing to stand by a story that one of the people who sourced it says might be false. In July, CNN broke news that Donald Trump was aware of that famous meeting with the Russian lawyer inside Trump Tower before the meeting happened. This would be potentially significant. Laney Davis, the lawyer representing Michael Cohen, says he was the source for that story. And then he admitted he doesn't really know if it's true. He can't back it up. CNN says it has other sources for the story, though it hasn't revealed who they might be. Last night on this show, journalist Glenn Greenwald explained CNN's reticence to backtrack on an obviously false story.
I find it to be, and obviously this is a high bar, one of the most humiliating and scandalous moments in the entire media behavior of the Trump-Russia saga. And they don't want to admit that they lied to the world, so they can't retract the story, and they can't admit they lied, so they're just continuing to stick to what everybody knows is a lie, but not many people care because people think, a lot of people anyway, that it was done for the right political agenda.
Alan Dershowitz is an emeritus professor of law at Harvard Law School. He's the author of The Case Against Impeaching Trump, and he joins us tonight. Professor, thank you for coming on. So watching this CNN saga, I keep and by the way, lots of news organizations get stories wrong. I've gotten stories wrong. My complaint is really, first, that they're not telling us what happened, but more than that, would it be significant if the story were true? In other words, if the president knew this meeting with this Russian lawyer was about to take place, should any of us care? Does that matter? Is that illegal? Is it unethical?
Well, it's certainly not illegal. The president's certainly entitled to know about a meeting between his son and somebody who wanted to give him dirt on a candidate or who wanted to talk to him about maybe changing rules involving sanctions. Those are all, perfectly proper meetings. But CNN is in a box. I want to put the best possible light on it. Let's assume it has one or two other sources in addition to Lanny Davis, who did the right thing by coming forward and acknowledging that his story, he doesn't have any support for his story. But they can't reveal their sources. And I have two suggestions for them. Number one, that they tell us the nature of the sources without telling us the names. Are they eyewitnesses? Is it a hearsay source? Or second, that they give the source to their expert on journalism and let their expert decide whether or not they should stick with the story, or some outside expert, somebody from the Columbia School of Journalism, who could learn the name of the sources, then go talk to the sources, still keep their names confidential, and then come forward and say, there is a basis, we're standing behind CNN. They have to do something to preserve their credibility.
Well, sure. I mean, all news organizations, us, them, all of us call for transparency. That's our job. So we should provide it when asked, and they're not. So you wrote a piece recently that reminded me, anyway, that you're not, I know that you have been typecast as a Trump defender, but you're not a Trump defender. You're a liberal. And I think you've got a lot of problems with Trump. But in the piece, you made a really interesting point, I thought. You said that our system of checks and balances is out of whack because of the independent prosecutor and his investigation. Tell us what you meant.
That's absolutely right. Look, everybody's checking everybody else under the kind of Madisonian system of checks and balances that has served us so well. The courts are striking down executive orders, sometimes upholding them. Yes. The president's checking Congress. Congress, particularly if the Democrats get control, will check the presidency. But who's guarding the guardians? Who is overseeing the special counsel or other overzealous prosecutors? The courts aren't doing it. There's no process that today exists, and I suggested the appointment of a permanent group to oversee prosecutorial overreaching. It could include great former prosecutors like Robert Morgenthau, the legendary DA of New York. Right. It could include ethics experts like Stephen Gillers, the professor at Columbia, constitutional experts like Floyd Abrams, and they would have the opportunity to at least file reports about prosecutorial overreach, because today the special counsel is the only institution of government outside of our system of checks and balances.
Whoever thought that up is insane. I hope you live forever, because we need people to remind us of that. Thank you, Professor. Thank you very much.
I'm turning 80 in 2 days, so I'm on my way. Thank you.
Well, please keep going. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
We've got a Fox News alert for you. Former Trump campaign advisor George Papadopoulos will not drop his guilty plea with Special Prosecutor Robert Mueller. That's according to his wife. Papadopoulos was a low-level aide to Trump's campaign. He pleaded guilty to lying to federal agents. His wife was on our show recently and had said that he was considering backing out of the plea deal, but apparently, as of tonight, has changed his mind. More than 90% of the heroin in the United States comes from one country. That country is Mexico. Now Mexican politicians are talking about making it easier to produce heroin in Mexico. What are the effects on us? We'll speak to a top Mexican advisor next. Mexico is the leading supplier of heroin to the United States. No one else is even close. About 95% of the heroin that comes into this country comes from Mexico. And that's not a small thing. About 50,000 Americans are dying every year of opioid overdoses. Now, you'd think Mexico, as our putative friend, would want to help us, help cut the flow into this country, but that's not happening. The opposite is happening. Mexican politicians are planning to legalize opium production, which of course would make it easier to produce heroin and kill Americans. Almost nobody has said anything about this, but we thought it was worth noting. Juan Hernandez was an advisor to the former president Vicente Fox of Mexico, and he joins us tonight from there. Juan, thank you very much for coming on. So I know that...
Thank you for inviting me, my friend.
I know that the Mexican government isn't producing heroin, though obviously members of the Mexican government have gotten rich because of the heroin trade. But I want to apportion blame where it's due. It's drug cartels are doing this. But why would the Mexican government, if Mexico is indeed our ally and not our enemy, bent on our destruction, why would they make it easier for Mexican drug cartels to kill Americans?
Well, to start with, this seems like it's a fad now in the United States. Let's blame Mexico for all of our problems in the United States. I mean, this is ridiculous. You have some legislators in Mexico, some legislators, especially at the level of the state of Guerrero, where you're talking about where the poppy bulbs are produced, which, by the way, most of the production there goes for the terminally ill, not to send to the United States. But you have legislators in one state in Mexico, and these are lower-level legislators. They're talking about legalizing drugs. My friend, we have them in Colorado also, and we have them in other areas in the United States
but
too.
I guess if I can just interrupt you and just
not to believe in legalizing drugs, but we have a terrible problem in the United States with the consumption of drugs. It's our problem. We need to solve it in the United States, not blame it on Mexico.
But hold on, let me just look. And I want to be rational about this, but I would say a couple of things. One, I don't believe it's just some legislator in an obscure Mexican state. I think the new president has said out loud and on camera that he is open to this idea. No, I think that's right. Correct me if I'm wrong. Let me say also that marijuana is not heroin. Heroin has a demonstrated ability to override free will. At some point, you don't choose to do heroin. You're physically addicted to it. There's a quantum difference, and it's also deadly. 50,000 people dying every year.
And
it's a crisis.
Terrible. And
that's
it's terrible.
More people died of drug ODs
we need to deal with
than
mental health.
Okay. No, but we also need. But hold on now.
I totally agree. It's
how does
terrible.
It make?
And I've had friends, of course, that have suffered.
But why shouldn't we consider it an act of aggression, an act of war, for the country that is the primary, and no one else comes close, supplier of this deadly drug into our country, to consider making it easier to bring that drug here? Why wouldn't we be concerned about that?
Okay. You say you want to be rational, and I believe you, my friend.
I do.
Okay, we have a problem with the consumption in the United States, and we must recognize that. The drugs are coming into the United States, and we're not doing anything. I think we go back to just saying no with Nancy Reagan. There has not been a serious program in the United States to stop the drug consumption. I've had friends of the DEA tell me in the United States, Juan, if we would just stop a few of the trucks in California and in Texas, we would find, because we're talking about from Mexico, from Central America, from Afghanistan, from other countries, it's wholesale coming to the United States.
No, but I'm sort of okay. No, but look, I'm trying to track with you here,
and millions of people who are consuming drugs. My
I understand.
Friend. It's a very complex problem, and Mexico and the United States need to work together.
But I'm wondering why you're doing what so many of our guests do. I'm willing to concede many things that you said. It's a complex problem. The United States needs to take a new tack on the problem. Our rehabilitation programs don't work. They have never worked. We should be thinking about how to make them better. There are a lot of things we can do.
That's right.
But you are totally unwilling, as almost all of our guests are, to concede that Mexico has any responsibility at all to its northern neighbor and benefactor.
Oh, no, Mexico does have a responsibility.
Okay, so why can't you just say that it is outrageous for anyone in Mexico, which would not exist as a first world country without the United States, that's an economic fact, to suggest that they would make it easier to kill Americans with heroin? It's really simple. Why can't you just announce that?
But let's not blame Mexico for killing Americans. I mean, that's a big, big jump. I think that it's outrageous, my friend.
Heroin is killing thousands of Americans. That's not a made-up stat.
In Mexico, no, I think it's outrageous for legislators in Mexico and legislators in the United States to minimize this terrible, terrible problem of production in some countries, including Mexico, and in consumption in the United States.
Not in some countries, including.
Let me just say,
why is it so hard to get anybody to concede that Mexico has ever done anything wrong? Is it a holy country? Is it totally above? Look, I'm not attacking Mexico for all of America's problems. I'm saying that 95% of heroin comes from Mexico.
No. I'm willing to say that there is a problem, and Mexico is part of the problem, but the United States is the one consuming the drugs. Why is it so difficult for you, my friend,
so it's
to
our
accept
fault.
that?
So you're going to say to the
this
parents of a
attraction.
17-year-old OD victim, it's your kid's fault. Really? Because actually, I think the blame goes both ways.
No, I'm saying that in the United States of America, we need to work on this problem. It's incredible how many millions of people are falling into the trap of these terrible drugs. But let me talk a little bit about Mexico. Yes, you have accused the state of Guerrero.
Unfortunately, we're out of time. I've certainly let you filibuster quite a bit.
And I think there are problems there. But let me tell you about the state of Guanajuato in Mexico. Mexico is a lot larger. The state of Guanajuato has a conservative governor, Diego Sinue, that is pushing not for drugs, but on the contrary, family values, just like you and I, my friend, are supporting.
Thank you, Juan. You are more reasonable than most people I talk to on this subject, but not entirely reasonable.
Thank you.
Lou Dobbs is the host of Lou Dobbs Tonight. He's been talking about these issues for a long time. So, Lou, if there were to become a realistic push to legalize poppy production, opium production, heroin production in Mexico, why wouldn't that be a profound act of aggression against the United States?
Well, I think it is, as you pointed out. And Juan Hernandez, by the way, Tucker, I quit talking to him a long time ago for reasons that you should now understand fully. He is a wonderful emissary for the dinosaur system of Mexico that is being replaced by Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador, who I think represents a real opportunity for this president to do great things together with him and change things in Mexico and along our borders. I'm very hopeful. But when we don't even destroy the poppy fields in Afghanistan after 17 years of war,
yeah, I've noticed.
I get the feeling that there is something of less than a full commitment to protecting American citizens. Because
so why would that
where
be?
Most of it comes from.
Can you stop right there? Because I think that's far more interesting than what some legislator in a southern Mexican state is proposing. Right, no, but it's true. That's the core right there. We've occupied Afghanistan since a couple of my kids in high school, before they were even born, and there are still poppy fields there. Why is there not the will to fight a problem that's killing 70,000 people a year in this country?
Without President Trump, there wouldn't have been an expression of any will at all. He is leading on this issue. It goes back to his first statements as he announced that he was running for president. People were scratching their heads. Because the president's actually talking about saving lives and stopping drugs that are killing tens of thousands of Americans every year. This is the president, remember, who didn't want us to be squandering trillions of dollars in Afghanistan and Iraq. This is the president who, sometimes with great bombast, has actually pursued a modest foreign policy. And by the way, I think he and Lopez Obrador, the new president of Mexico, when he's inaugurated at the end of the year, I think they're going to do great things. I really do.
Huh, that's interesting. You're the first person I've heard say that. Well, so I'm approaching with an open mind. Lou Dobbs, thank you very much.
An
very
open
knowledgeable.
mind, but I also heard great skepticism, and I don't say it's misplaced. Great to be with you.
Interesting. Great to see you. Thank you. There are reports tonight that a Chinese-owned company had access to Hillary Clinton's email server. The FBI contests that, though hasn't cleared it up at all. So what is true and what is not? Our investigation into it is next. Democrats claim to be in the trenches with women in the so-called war on women. It's unclear what role six-term Congressman and Democratic Party leader Keith Ellison is playing in that battle. But now that he's been credibly accused of beating an ex-girlfriend, you'd think he'd have to lay low for a while or at least explain himself. After all, his fellow Minnesotan, former Senator Al Franken, stepped down for doing far less than what Ellison is accused of doing. Democrats said they're going to investigate the allegations against Ellison, which we should note, because we always do, are mere allegations and not proved. But we'd like to know if they are true. So we reached out today to find out if the party has made any progress in this investigation. It sounds like investigators have not made a lot of progress. They may have hired the same investigators who looked into Joy Reid's hacked blog posts over at NBC, or tried to figure out how the Access Hollywood tape got to the Washington Post. Two investigations that are ongoing. We will keep you posted as we get more information. Well, there are some obvious upsides to storing classified information on a private server in your basement, but one of the downsides is that foreign adversaries could hack it. Wouldn't be that hard. According to the Daily Caller News Foundation, that happened to Hillary Clinton. They say a Chinese-owned company did it and may have had real-time access to her emails during her tenure as Secretary of State. The FBI is denying that, sort of, but the story is still fluid and confusing. And for some reason, a lot of people don't seem that interested in finding out what actually happened. Tom Fitton is in the business of finding out what happened. He's the president of Judicial Watch, and he joins us tonight. So, Tom, this seems like one of those stories, and I just want to be completely clear, as we were last night. I don't know the answer. I don't know what happened, of course. But I do think it's worth finding out. And so I'm a little bit confused by the confusion. Why wouldn't we know conclusively, years later, what happened to those emails?
Well, there are a few questions. Did this meeting take place, as alleged, between officials at the Office of Director of National Intelligence and Peter Strzok and his colleagues at the FBI? And was there a discussion about compromise of the server by a Chinese front company?
Right.
That it happened? Did they look into it? Did they follow up on it? We're not getting much feedback from the FBI.
So, but why would it be hard? I mean, again, you're in the business of getting government to divulge things it wants to hide. So why would it be so hard to get an answer to a very simple question like that?
Because the answer would be embarrassing. We know separately that we went to the FBI. We set up a meeting through Peter Strzok because we had evidence that the Russians had compromised Hillary Clinton's server. Our guy met with Strzok's team for 4 hours. They never followed up on any of it.
How compelling was the evidence that you had?
Well, it was compelling enough that the person who was doing it for us, who had a security clearance, thought he had to go to the FBI and tell them that there might have been a classified compromise of information by these Russia-type servers. And the document that we had found came from the same groups of server numbers that were affiliated with Hillary Clinton's server. Pretty substantial evidence. And we gave it to the FBI. No evidence that it was done, anything was followed up on.
So did they ever get back to you about it?
No, they never got back to us. But also Comey. You know, Comey is the best witness here because he said, well, you know, we didn't have any evidence that her server was classified, which wasn't necessarily true. But he admitted that, look, they could have done it without us knowing about it. We'd never know about it because they could have covered their tracks. So no one's ruled out that her server has been compromised. In fact, Comey said, we just assume it had been compromised. And sadly, we've sued this administration for its failure to do a damage assessment caused by her leaving classified information on the public equivalent, or the internet equivalent of a public park bench. And they fight us on this. They said it wasn't serious enough to warrant a damage assessment. Look, the deep state doesn't want to do a damage assessment. They don't want to grapple with this because to do so would undermine the fiction that what Hillary did caused no damage and deserves no prosecution.
I think you could take Hillary out of the equation and still be appalled by it. Is the Chinese military hacking into the personal accounts of high American officials? Yes, they are. Let's find out the details. Tom Fitton, I hope you do find out the details, and I hope you bring them here. We will. Thank you. Here's a rhetorical question. Is social media wrecking America? Of course it is. Let us count the ways. Next. Social media has completely, well, we weren't paying attention, transformed our society. And in a lot of ways we don't even understand yet. Fox Sports 1 host Jason Whitlock says it's wrecking sports too. And he joins us tonight. So how is, I mean, I guess I'm not surprised to hear this, but I'll be interested to hear the details. How is social media wrecking sports?
I think it's killing sports because all the athletes are 1,000% addicted to social media. The entire national anthem controversy is being driven by social media. These guys are addicted to retweets, likes, and mentions, and followers. And so, again, there's no real substance to what they're doing other than trying to build their social media brands. It sounds great when they get, oh, we're trying to raise awareness about police brutality. They're trying to raise awareness about their social media brands. That's what they're really doing. All of these athletes addicted to social media, and it's driving a lot of their actions.
But is there a point where you become rich and famous and successful enough that you don't have to spend life with your face in your phone? Or no, I guess?
I don't think, no. Look, these cell phones and smartphones and technology have hacked all of our brains. And this is especially acute, I think, with black people, and particularly with black athletes. They're so addicted to this thing that we metaphorically or theoretically call black Twitter, and being approved over black Twitter. And whether or not there's some Twitter lynch mob agreeing or disagreeing with what you say, I just think, yeah, there's no amount of money. Take a LeBron James. He's got 40 million Twitter followers. He's worth more than $500 million. But he's addicted to social media. This is, you know, all of these young people, and look, a lot of us in the media that aren't even that young are completely addicted to social media approval. Our brains have been hacked.
I wonder why high-profile people don't fight back. Why doesn't anybody say, you know what, I don't want to be captive to the whims of a mob of people I've never met before. I'm getting off this garbage. Why doesn't anyone ever say that?
Because so many media executives are so clueless that they go to social media and think they're taking the temperature of America. And so a lot of these media people and athletes are driven by the desires and what their executives, the people hiring and firing and paying them, what they are basing their beliefs on. And so many executives are so caught up in social media that, oh my God, someone has 500,000 Twitter followers. That must mean they're very popular, and what they have to say is very smart, and it's approved by so many people. The executives are fooled, and so let's don't be shocked that the people that work for them are fooled or trying to please them through social media.
The great Jason Whitlock. Thank you very much. Sad.
Thank you, Tugger.
Our investigation into Antifa is next. What is the group really about, and are you still allowed to criticize them? We'll speak to a former member or associate of Antifa next. The left-wing group Antifa doesn't even pretend to reject violence. They've regularly vandalized property and assaulted people they disagree with, and they've done it proudly on camera. Earlier this month, they showed up at a Unite the Right rally in Washington, but they couldn't find actual fascists to hit. They attacked the press instead. And yet, amazingly, in a remarkable display of both dumbness and masochism, the media still defend them. According to CNN, criticizing Antifa is racist. Now, that may be confusing to you since most of its members seem to be white. On the other hand, they wear black clothing. Watch.
Let's be clear also about what's going on here. The theme here is, I'm Donald Trump and I'll protect you from the scary black people. Antifa is widely perceived as an African-American organization. This is about black versus white. This is about Donald Trump's appeal to racism.
But wait, you really want to defend Antifa? Aren't they committed to violence? Well, yes, CNN concedes. It's hard to deny that because it's on tape. But they mean well, so lay off.
It says it right in the name, Antifa, anti-fascism, which is what they were there fighting. Listen, there's, no organization is perfect. There was some violence. No one condones the violence, but there were different reasons for Antifa and for these neo-Nazis to be there. One, racist fascists. The other group fighting racist fascists. There's a distinction there.
So there you have it. According to CNN, Antifa is a civil rights organization, and you'd have to be a monster to criticize them. We decided to ask Antifa what they think about being defended by corporate media, and that's not easy to do, by the way. Antifa doesn't have a headquarters or a formal leadership. A lot of its members wear ski masks and don't want to come on camera. But we did find Scott Crow. He once organized events for Antifa, and he joins us tonight. Scott, do you think it's racist to criticize Antifa? It seems like a pretty white group to me, at least from the pictures.
I think there's a reason to critique anything that's happening. But the thing is, you're conflating people who are trying to stop people who are calling for genocide and the murder of wholesale murder of huge populations of people, immigrants, women, calling for rape. And so these people want to stop that physically in some instances, but largely behind the scenes. I mean, there's more fascists that wear red ties and blue suits and white shirts on boardrooms and on TV shows and everything than are people on the streets. They just confront fascism and neo-Nazis where they're at. If neo-Nazis come to the street, then Antifa shows up there.
Well, I'm actually in agreement with you. I do think there are a lot of authoritarians anyway who wear suits and ties for sure. I see them every day here in Washington. But I guess the problem that I have is that Antifa reserves for itself the right to hurt people and destroy property on the basis of its judgment about those people. So if I said, I think, Scott Crow, you're a fascist, and I